So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today we have a map which I have actually shown before, albeit only once before I think, and it was quite a long time ago as well. This is the Forlenden Coast, and it's going to be quite an interesting one. I don't know rather what sorts of battles to classify this as. It could end up being a siege if indeed the blue team, which only have 2 armies to the red team's 3, decide to dig in this ruined site over here, which I would assume is the plan, because if it's a 2v3 engaging on the open field, the extra numbers can really make it quite difficult for you, especially, well, it depends a little bit more on what factions you're facing as well, how devastating that can be, but it would be very difficult for the 2, even with more quality driven armies, to win this particular fight. But other than that, it's sort of a slightly undulating terrain leading up to the ruined site itself, and we're right next to the coast as well, so the map itself is not completely traversable of course because of the water, but there's still plenty of room, more room than on most maps actually, to move around on, with how open the actual land on this side of the field actually is. And we shall start off with Froggy, who is playing as one of the attacking armies, and once again we are seeing the hobbits in action. We've seen a little bit more of the hobbits of late than we've seen in the past. Proudfoot Protectors are here. Very important unit for the hobbits, really the one unit that you can really hang your hat on in the hobbit roster to do pretty much everything you would want them to. Good damage at range, they can also hold the line in melee because of their pikes, and among the hobbits anyway, they are decently armed. You can see they actually wear a bit of armour in their chainmail, so they can actually withstand a little bit of a beating along with their shields as well. Several of them are also donning their trusty pipes. We've also got some Turkish Hunters who are actually already in range of the initial ranks of the blue team army, whose deployment zone was closer to the red team. Basic unit of hobbit archers this, they're lightly armoured, but the same sort of thing applies to them as applies to most low tier archers, where it's just volume of fire really, more so than anything else, as to why you'd bring the Turkish Hunters, another unit of Proudfoot Protectors next to them, and also some Banderbrass archers, which not the General's Bodyguard today, but they're better all round than the Turkish Hunters. Of course, they've got better armour, they're better at range, and also they have an armour piercing attack in melee with those clubs. So it'll be interesting to see how this skirmish force actually gets on. Hobbits should definitely have a better skirmish force than Angmar, who are directly in front of the hobbits themselves, but we shall see. Then moving on, we have Tundra's Fox, the player who has decided to break with making it a lore-friendly battle. There's always one, and it is going to be Harad who are going to be helping out the Numenorians and the Hobbits, a very strange alliance indeed. He's got some Haradrim archers, once again, just a light archer which can freely skirmish. You don't really care too much if they do end up losing their skirmish fight, as long as they're at least wasting the ammunition of the opponent. Haradrim Spearman, pretty similar story, but in melee. As with most lower end spears, if you send them in on their own, they're not going to accomplish anything really. But if you send them in as part of a unified assault, they can at least shrug off some of the damage that would be destined for some of your other units. Southrim archers are not exactly the finest example of a bowman either, but they are a little bit better than the Haradrim archers in front of them, a little bit bulkier, a little bit more damaging, but still they're not going to win any contests really against the kind of forces you're likely to be facing. Just in behind them, some Muhard Beast Hunters. Again, armour-piercing attacks in melee and at range, so a good multifaceted unit this, albeit they are quite fragile. As with any Muhard unit, they have very light armour, if any armour at all in some cases. Yeah, so the Javelins, if you can get them into good range, then they'll be useful, especially against a heavily armoured faction such as Angmar. Over here, some Champions of Nafrat, so an armour-piercing shock infantry unit, one of the very best bodyguard tier examples of this in the game. Very, very scary, especially for a faction like Angmar, less so for their allies Rhudaur on this occasion. A couple of units of Trollmen and Demons of the Desert as well, so again, Harad very rarely go without the full complement of Trollmen, because they are so effective, the Demons of the Desert with their really, really devastating ranged attack, and then the others for how good they are in melee, especially in comparison to some of the more basic Haradrim units. The punch they offer is simply too good to pass up. The Mumakil, on the other hand, are somewhat less effective, as we saw in the Grassy Plains battle, probably a couple of months ago by the time this one comes out, to be honest. But yeah, we saw the Mumakil then. We'll see if they get on any better this time. I have my doubts, because they're just such a fiddly unit to try and use, especially when you're going up against factions which have got plenty of tools to deal with such things, like Rhudaur. Rhudaur are definitely pretty good at dealing with those elephant class units. And finally we have Joran, who's playing as Numenor. He has got Belagai footmen, plenty of them, just to save a little bit of money. When you're the 3 armies, you're going to have to cut corners somewhere, and Belagai footmen are decent as far as line spears go anyway. Belagai archers are good at skirmishing as well, so certainly I think the skirmish advantage will be in favour of the red team here. Rhudaur have got quite a few archer options, but not many of them are heavily armoured, and Angmar just straight up don't have a lot of archer options at all. Seafarers of Nindamos, again, the javelins, medium axe infantry as well. Useful all round, especially against Angmar again at range. In melee they'd probably be slightly better against Rhudaur because of the extra damage that an axe unit tends to have. But of course Rhudaur aren't exactly lacking in that department either, so 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, I guess. Belagai pikes, useful to have phalanxes like this set up, especially with the Numenor sentinels around. No other faction on the field today is going to have a unit as effective as a pike than the Numenor sentinels, but Rhudaur and Angmar aren't lacking for pikes, so it'll be interesting to see how that particular engagement goes. Pharism Swordmasters, again, those 3 hit points, devastating unit of infantry. 1-to-1 they'll be able to defeat anything that comes at them, but it may very well end up not being 1-to-1, and Rhudaur will hope to use their javelins on units such as this in the Champions of Neferat. There is our Pharazon himself. Plenty of Numenorian shield guard, nice line spears with armour piercing. We shall see if that proves to be effectively used. Again, Angmar would be the better target for any armour piercing. And finally, Pharazim Nobles. Nice to have more manoeuvrability on the field as well, in addition to just the Mumakil. The Hobbits may have some hidden cavalry around as well. But yeah, as the army of 3, you definitely want to try and claim the manoeuvrability on the battlefield so that the opposition find it really hard to break out. Now then, we have Simon SI, who's playing as Angmar, who appears to have left 2 of his units behind by accident. He has got some Blackwatch Legion and some Witch Realm Pikemen. Both of these units will be very, very useful. The Blackwatch Legion for potentially counter-pushing into enemy lines if they don't attack with enough. The Witch Realm Pikemen just for straight up holding those lines. So you do need to be careful, and hopefully those units can get back to the main body of his army. He's got some Trolls of Angmar, useful, especially against stuff like the Numenor Sentinels, higher end pikes, breaking up enemy phalanxes and strong positions, that sort of thing. But if you do find yourself up against the more damaging enemy infantry, especially the Trollmen examples from Harad, the Trolls won't do that well. We do have the Witches. The Witches are, of course, a devastating tool, which actually in the last few times we've seen the Witches, perhaps proving the point about them that they're not actually overpowered. They haven't really done an awful lot. They have scored hits, but none of them have been especially telling, and we shall see if that proves to be the case once more here. Angmar Halberds, useful against the more heavily armoured elements from the attacking armies, but that's really only Numenor, to be honest. Harad and the Hobbits definitely don't pack on the armour as much as several other factions can do. Have some Witch Realm Pikemen here, some Angmar Halberds, we've got some unupgraded Guardians of Khan Doom, so they're obviously a nice unit for holding the line as well. Not the most damaging upper end line infantry unit in the game, but certainly still a good option. Gundabad Guard are in there as well, pretty much the same thing, but a spear unit could be useful for zoning out cavalry, albeit Angmar seem to have anti-cavalry well and truly covered. Witch Realm Hammer Guard will be another really devastating infantry unit that is on the field today. Now, Witch Realm Hammer Guard will be most useful against Numenor, of course, but they could still find their use as well against some of the more armoured Hobbit units if the Proudfoots are sent in. Witch Realm Blackguard and Guardians of Khan Doom once again, so as you would expect, perhaps Angmar going for a very robust force backed up by some of their more deadly infantry units and support tools like the Witches. And then we have DF Morris, who is the one who sent me this battle replay, so big thank you to him. We've got Rhudaur, who have got the Franadine Nobles over here. Armour piercing in melee, they've got the armour upgrade as well. Very nice unit of cavalry this, but they do need to be very careful because the Pharazim Nobles will defeat them fairly handily in melee as melee knights. He's also gone for the cheaper unit of pikes, the Dunman Pikemen, so nice for holding the line certainly, but they will be very vulnerable to missile fire, and I would imagine the red team are going to have the advantage in that particular theatre. We have some Blackwolds, again, Berserker class units, most useful against Numenor once again. It would be nice to equalise the quality because Numenor definitely the highest quality faction they'll be facing, I suppose. Rhudaur Clansmen, armour upgrade, they'll be useful. They can also absorb quite a lot of punishment, as well as being a good high mass unit on the front line. Granadine Pikemen, a good unit of shielded pikes. They don't quite share the same space as the Numenor Sentinels in terms of quality, but it's the closest Rhudaur can get, and they always seem to perform well, as I tend to say. Then we've got some Rhudaur Swordsmen as well. Trollshore Axe Throwers, these units will be very, very important. Franadine Rangers will be vital, of course, if Rhudaur are to have much success in this battle. Axe Throwers, Attenmore's Troll Hunters, Rodram Javelins, Franadine Berserkers, and the Enslavers. So pretty much from the Berserkers over to the Trollshore Axe Throwers, the hand-thrown projectiles of Rhudaur will be absolutely vital if they hope to secure final victory in the field. But I suppose we shall head back over to here, and without further ado, let's begin. as the Turkish Hunters will begin to open up on the Angmarim who have been left behind. Although that is a blank fire, so they might be kind and allow Angmar to move those units back. There's also these long-bottom mob which have zoned in and out there. Very similar to javelins and axe throwers, but obviously their pebbles are not quite as damaging as other such units. So it'll be interesting to see when the hobbits do potentially phase in and out. So yes, they are going to take up a position here in the defensive ruins, which is for the best, because otherwise they would get overrun and overwhelmed. A combination of the skirmishers, really nasty skirmishers that all three of those factions can bring, and they've got very different strengths. The hobbits all about armor piercing and numbers. Harad kind of similar, although with the build they've got I think it's more quality and armor piercing considering the sheer amount of trollman they have. And then Numenor of course all about that heft, that heavy armor, the outright skill as well. Base damage, that sort of thing. Which will be very useful when it comes to dealing with a faction like Rhudaur in melee potentially. As the trolls begin to shuffle their way across, it will be interesting to see as well how the blue team decide to set the table. Because like I said, I think the red team are going to have a substantial advantage when it comes to their skirmishes. Just knowing you're facing off against the hobbits, because so much of the hobbits' useful units, or so many of the useful units from the hobbit faction, tend to be skirmishers. You know you're going to be facing a lot of skirmishers. Harad, you're not quite sure what they're going to bring, but on this occasion they have brought a decent amount of lower end skirmishers. Numenor as well. Their archers, Belagair archers are decent, but their other archers tend to be lower ammunition, or they can only bring one, like the Numenor Royal Guard. So it's a little bit of a strange situation. Plenty of Snagar archers from Angmar here though, so they should be able to trade back and forth with the hobbits without feeling too bad about themselves. They will still lose those fights however. Snagar the lowest of the low. And the hobbits can't afford to be taken lightly. He's got some goblin tracks as well, so to be fair to Angmar actually, he's got quite a lot of the lower end skirmishers that this faction can bring. So they do have the ability to do the damage, but it's really going to be, I think the initial skirmish fight here is going to go in favour of the red team at long range with those bows, but as soon as they move in with their infantry, that's where the blue team can capitalise with a lot of their close range skirmishers. All of the javelins and the rangers as well from Rhudaur, and of course the mighty witchers from Angmar. They've got plenty of pikes to be holding onto the front line with as well, but nothing quite as strong as the Numenor Sentinels, and nothing quite so multifaceted as the Proudfoot Protectors. Interesting to see the Great Eagles from Froggy. They're a devastating unit if you can charge with them, but we saw in the last Hobbit battle, in the ambush, while the Hobbits were ultimately victorious, the Great Eagles weren't actually used all that well. They got one charge off, which was good, another unit of Great Eagles as well, so 2 units of them. In a situation like this as well, they are effectively cavalry, so they will behave in much the same way, so I'm not sure whether the Great Eagles are actually going to be all that useful when it comes to taking a defensive position such as this. But we'll just have to wait and see on that front, won't we? Granadine Rangers already right at the back, so they're going to be preserved, they're going to sit here. Just have a little look at this area as well, so this road around the back, if you want to expose yourself to a bunch of ranged fire, but this is, you need to pressurise every angle you can, so someone may have to bite that bullet. You can go up this way, you can go that way, and you can go around the back. So there's 4 ways in, essentially. Technically 3 if the defenders want to fall all the way back to this choke point right from the off, in which case you'll definitely need to pressurise every angle. 1 army per approach. We'll have to wait and see. Pharism Nobles loitering around here with some grim intent. Rhudaur need to be careful, because it might be tempting to send your Granadine Nobles over here to deal with this little scouting party, but the Pharism Nobles will win that fight fairly comfortably. And they are just waiting here, so they've claimed some map control here with this 1 unit of cavalry, and this is something that Rhudaur will have to deal with. I would send the Granadine Nobles over to deal with them with the support of pikes, because that would really be enough to get this cavalry unit to retreat. There's no way they'd stick around with pikes and fellow knights coming after them. I think Morris is going to be taking the school of thought that he's going to leave his knights till the end and hopefully break out towards the end and then start doing some devastating rear charging, which, when you're talking about lance knights, is a potentially devastating thing to do, but if you start to fall behind too much, it becomes a bit of a pointless endeavour, to be honest. Angmar setting up all of their forces out here. A couple of names that I don't recognise, Simon SI being one of them. In fact, he's really the only name that I don't recognise at all. I know who everyone else is, and have seen them before. The Witcher Arm Enslavers. Someone said they look like, was it walnuts? Or something like that? Once before, and I can't unsee that now, because they do have a bit of a strange unit model when you consider it. It's a bit of an odd one. Their weaponry is a bit strange as well, but no matter. Pharism Nobles, are they going to leave this area? They are. This is a lot of map control to give up, honestly. It gives them a similar terrain elevation to potentially conquer here, Numenor. Rhudaur Nobles are still just loitering around in here. I'm not sure how all of this basic stuff is going to treat the defenders. It makes their armies bigger and makes them look more intimidating. Stuff like Angmar Marauders, Rhudaur Swordsmen, Angmar Halberdiers, Snaga. Is this really what you're going to want when, especially Numenor, start to make their presence felt? What have we got here? Blackguard. They're going to move backwards. And this one, I have a feeling this is going to be quite violent and quite quick, just because a big portion of this battle right at the start seems to just be manoeuvring, which leads me to deduce things are going to get underway pretty quickly. We can actually go and have a look though at Froggy's army, because we'll be able to see most of them moving forward now. Hobbitry arms, very basic armor-piercing spear, but still useful. There are so many of them that they will be quite useful in a situation such as this, and they do make up the bulk of your initial lines here. Long bottom mob, like I said, throwing stones and then using those clubs on their back. There are the Proudfoots, all of the skirmishers, which we've already seen up till this point, actually. Where's Froggy's general? Is he in the Band of Brass Archers? Or is he in one of the Proudfoot units? Oh yes, there he is. There is Samwise with his short sword. Let's go up to ×2 speed while this is going on. In fact, we'll go to ×6. Enough of this nonsense. This is probably going to be a shorter battle as a result, but no matter. And it's a nice defensive position as well, so the attackers, even though they should have the advantage when it comes to skirmishing, I guess they are going to be hyper-aggressive. Might end up being their undoing, especially with more lightly armoured factions such as Harad and the Hobbits. If they go straight in, they could open themselves up to damage from even something as lowly as the Snaga archers. Could end up being a problem for them. Will the Snaga start to fire here? They probably should, given the close proximity of the Haradrim army. And forward they come. The Haradrim archers scurrying into place. They're going to shoot point blank. And they need to do something here to respond. They're going to fire. It looks as though they're trying to maneuver themselves so that the unit can start firing. But so far, not at all. And they're backing up again here. Weird battle to start off with here. But hiding their Reforged javelins, ready. They're allowing them a little bit more space here, but perhaps that opens up better angles for skirmishers. They've made the battlefield quite small for themselves, the defenders, which is good in a way, but it also means you've got nowhere to go if things start to go wrong, and you have picked your hill, or hills, and will die on them. Haradrim archers are going to get into place, presumably to shoot this time, but with the Rhudaur clansmen covering for the Dunman pikemen, wouldn't be quite as devastating as it otherwise would be. They are actually going to sally forwards a little bit. No, I thought they were going to go after the Haradrim spearmen there, but they think better of it in the end. Here we go, Haradrim archers now firing, going after the Rhudaur nobles from the front. The multiple HP, the shields, the upgraded armour should make that quite a difficult prospect, but we'll see. I mean, going these two factions, natural allies, but they're much better as natural allies when they're actually being aggressive, because both of them are pretty good at that, albeit in very different ways. When they're on the defence like this, their lack of a real long-range skirmisher focus can open them up to stuff like this. Having said that, it is only Haradrim archers. There's not really a great deal of an excuse. Like, you should be counter-skirmishing into them with stuff like the Snaga archers and the goblin trackers, because it's kind of what they're here for, isn't it? Now doing damage to the Angmar halberds, positionally having to get them out of there. It's a strange battle, this. Strange battle. Forward come the hobbits as well. Again, the idea the defenders have here is very clear. They want to just dig in and that be the be-all and end-all, but I don't know. Some of those arrows are finding their marks, but most of them are being buried into the dirt right in front of them. And unfortunately, with the Angmar halberds in full view, they represent the perfect target for a basic unit of archers like this, because you are still going to be very capable of doing damage. Pranodine nobles do get a charge here into the Haradrim spearmen. They will do a lot of damage off the charge. They need to cycle out quickly, because otherwise the anti-cavalry damage will be forthcoming, and you can see there several of the Rhudaur knights fall. Not really sure what Morris expected to get from that. And then we have over here as well, Snaga archers beginning to fire. Are they burying their ammunition into the dirt too? Some of it, but some of it also not. Better than the other unit is currently managing. Numenor getting into position. Over here, a combination of Gundabad Guard and Witchround Pikemen, so showing plenty of respect to the Numenor advance, as well they should, with the quality that Numenor can bring to the table. Still those Franodine Rangers hiding there, lots of the units back here on the hill. Hobbits starting to creep their way forwards. I mean, I expected the red team to have the advantage in terms of skirmishing, but I didn't expect the blue team to be quite so passive. I expected them to hang back a bit. Again, the Franodine nobles are being used to charge directly in to these units, but it's not going to yield them much at all. Once again, they're charging into spears. The hobbitry and arms will be slightly more worrisome for them, actually, with the little lick of AP damage they also have, and when they cycle back out, the shields won't be coming into effect, allowing the Turkish Hunters to do a bit more damage. So yeah, not great use of the Franodine nobles here either so far. And so far, the red team will be delighted with how this has gone, because the blue team appear to be digging their own grave by simply not responding in the kind of way that you need to in this situation. Balagire archers are getting into position, and once again, they're just going to be able to get into this position free of any sort of competition. They could start shooting into that front line. Plenty of these units over here are a little bit more well prepared for dealing with archers like this, but I mean, you may as well, as the attackers, if you can get full value off your archers, get all of your volleys down range, chances are you're probably going to win. And what are they actually going after here? Rhudaur clansmen from the back and Etamor's troll hunters? I mean, it's, again, you're going to do more damage hitting a unit in the back, and the more kills you can get, the better situation you're going to be in. They're electing to just try and weather this storm here, the defenders. I don't think they have the luxury of doing that. They've gone for more numbers heavy builds than perhaps Rhudaur and especially Angmar can go with, but it's such a risky thing to play a battle in this way. Goblin trackers still firing away, so at least Angmar are using their skirmishers. They are doing some good damage to that unit of Haradrim archers now. So better late than never. And there's also good damage coming in from the side from the Snaga archers as well. So this initial skirmish force, Tundra's Foxo will be pleased with what it's done. And he can continue to fire a few more volleys in before those units are picked off one by one. The hobbits, meanwhile, having their wicked way with the Rhudaur front line, as you would expect. The hobbits with plenty of basic skirmishers that they can use to shoot right down this line. Rhudaur swordsmen shielded, but the angle of fire, the shield should be coming into effect, but their armour is not as good as other units of this type. So they will still be taking damage, and the angle is such that some of the Dunman pikemen are also taking direct hits as well, so it's not a good start here for the blue team, not a good start at all. They're going to have to hope that when the battle truly gets underway and the infantry fights start, that their javelins, axe throwers and their witchers will be enough to really make up for this damage in a big way. Seafarers of Nindamos are moving forward again, pretty much free. Well, no, actually not free of competition this time. Franodine Berserkers are being utilised, but the Franodine Berserkers themselves are also a really good target for archers and javelins, because they are a much more dangerous unit than the kind of things they've been facing up to this point. More arrows being used, shot up into the air though, and now the Seafarers of Nindamos, now that the Berserkers have been pushed back, will use their javelins onto what was their initial target, I'm sure, which is this solid-looking Angmar front line. so far, the red team doing exactly what you would want to happen. Shire are in there, again just chipping away at the blue team's numbers. They are going to move forward now. If this was going to be what happened, you may as well have just ripped the band-aid off and charged forward more quickly than this. Rhudaur clansmen, they will certainly beat the Harad from Spearman, but with Shire in there it becomes a little bit more of a grey area. They do have the backup of some pikes though, so the Shire will leave that engagement. But now the Demons of the Desert are rolling in. They have a good opportunity here to actually do a lot of damage right down the line. There you go. It's only basic units this, but considering the way this battle has gone so far, I think it is a perfectly legitimate thing to just use your ammunition and weaken the blue team such that they just don't have the infantry to defend their skirmishers anymore. It's a very tempting thing to do in this kind of situation. The Demons of the Desert doing the business, they will turn around. The Radra Marchers firing over here. And they are getting the odd kill on Snaga. Not the finest prey by any means, but Seafarers of Nindamos hanging out. What have we here? Goblin trackers. Getting into a potentially better position. What are they actually going to try and fire at here? They are going to fire, again, choice of target is questionable here, right into the front of the Balagaya footman. Shielded, armour upgraded, also the least dangerous unit Numenor have to offer in melee. Like, even the Seafarers will probably be more dangerous in melee than them, and they're also continuing to do significant damage to your infantry with their javelins. So they represent a bit more of a threat. The Hobbits are starting to move forward after their initial skirmish. There are the Franadine Berserkers as well. And things are just bubbling away here. The Hashari fire once again doing more damage to those Franadine nobles, who at this point are depleted enough to the point where they won't be quite the tour de force they could have been in the late game. Still more reinforcements back over here. Plenty of Rhudaur's units of course can hide anywhere, so the attackers perhaps right to be cautious. Trollshire is taking some collateral damage more so than anything else because they can hide. They're just taking the odd hit that is actually destined for the Blackwatch Legion, and that could be the true target, honestly. Some wide shots on the Trollshire axe throwers because, I don't know, the Blackwatch Legion, heavily armoured, I don't know if their shield value would be coming into effect there as one of those grey areas. It's on the right side of the shield, but I wonder if it's counted as the unit's back that that's hitting. All quiet on this front still. The attackers perhaps running a little lower on ammunition now. Shari's still there. I don't know if they still have ammunition, but even if they don't, they will still be useful in melee later on, especially against Rhudaur. They do still have a bit of ammunition. Will they do more damage to this front line? Good opportunity to. And indeed they will. Those throwing knives they use are armour piercing, so those Rhudaur clansmen will really not enjoy being under that kind of pressure. And again they're going to be drawn forwards. They're being bullied here really, the blue team. Another volley. I think they should get it off, and they will. At least some of the unit did. They will be engaged in melee, but there's another unit of Hashari there as well. He's got two units of them, so it could have been the one unit actually did run out of ammunition initially. Dead Rhudaur unit still on the front line. Forward come the Turkish Hunters, who are probably out of ammunition. And now they're just sending forward another type of skirmish. You can see there the telltale pebble projectiles of the long bottom mob. They've got plenty of ammunition as well. They really don't tend to run out, so they could just stand there and fire for quite a while. But at this point Froggy is going to engage in melee. The first melee engagement we've actually had, and it comes at the hands of the Hobbits, amusingly enough. I mean, these Rangers are in a terrific position, but again, like, they knew they were there, so they were shooting into the Angmar halberds in behind them, I think, and getting missed shots onto the Franadine Rangers. If you know where a unit is, it is a legitimate tactic to do that. And the Hobbits making good use of that. And also he now knows there are Rangers there, so he knows what to expect later on, but I'm sure he'd be okay with being the fall guy in this battle at this point. The Rangers can only be in one place at any one time after all. Meanwhile, it's a bit of a disaster over here for Rhudaur by the looks of things. Looks like that sally forward went horribly wrong. Franadine nobles, I should say, trying to push forward, but Hashari not really an anti-cavalry unit, but there's so many of them at this point, and they do high enough damage that that will be enough to finish them off once and for all. Rhudaur clansmen pushing forward. It's going to need a terrific performance, I tell you, from the projectiles of Rhudaur and Angmar here as the battle goes on, because it's not been a good performance so far from anything else really. The Haradine Rangers are shooting in, and there are Proudfoot protectors on the front line, so it is definitely a worthwhile target, both in terms of numbers and quality, and need actually, because the hobbits, while their force is not infinite by any means, they are making decent progress there. Longbottom mob, now that the Franadine Rangers are revealed, those pebbles are coming in, trying to finish the Rangers off. A good choice, to say the least. Meanwhile, Balagire archers getting a little bit closer. Interesting that Numenor haven't actually engaged with this front line yet. They haven't actually done terrible damage to it either. Numenor's skirmishers don't seem to have done the same kind of thing. I suppose they were busy focusing down a unit like the Guardians of Kharndoom, but I would have rather gone into this front line. You're more likely to snag some pikemen, and the Gundabad Guard are not a bad unit to kill off either. Would have been preferable for me. Goblin trackers continuing to fire, but now Numenor are coming in. Seafarers of Nindamos into the teeth of those pikemen, but they're going to go pike to pike. To be fair though, Witch-Run pikemen superior to the Balagire. And then over here, Harad, are they going to move forward once again? I mean, the Hashari are in here, but it's the very depleted unit, so that unit of Rhudaur clansmen will finish them off. There is an opportunity here potentially for Harad to roll in with a lot of strength as well. Will they do so? What's happening with the hobbits? The hobbits struggling a lot more after those volleys from the Rangers, who have now departed. But the Black Walls are on the front line, they'll do a lot of damage. While they do have an armour-piercing focus, most certainly, just their sheer base damage alone will be enough to cleave their way through these merry hobbits. Unfortunately for them, defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. More pebbles finding their way into the Blackwatch Legion. They are armour-piercing, to be fair. Very low base damage, of course, but you will kill off a few more of these. Not the kind of unit I'd be too threatened by, though, to be honest. If you can hit the Hammer Guard, that would be a better choice of target. Try and at least get their hit points gone, so they're less of a concern in the late game. Balagire pikemen and seafarers here, as well as some Balagire footmen. Franadine berserkers slamming into the side of this line, and they'll be doing plenty of armour-piercing damage, but they're also exposed to the archers that are up on the cliff over there. Goblin trackers firing down the line as well. Franadine Rangers are actually shooting into this blob now. I mean, this isn't the creme de la creme of the Numenor force, so Joran won't be too concerned, but I think Tundra's Fox should be the one that's making a big assault at this point. The hobbits are in, Numenor are in, it's on you as well to try and push forward, because again, they can't target you all down, at least not with everything. Everyone's going to take some kind of damage. The hobbits actually are in a bit of trouble here. More pebbles colliding with the Rhudaur swordsmen. It would be a real shame if the attackers opened up with a really good skirmish phase to soften the enemy up, and then failing because of that age-old problem of them not unifying their assault and going in one by one or very disjointed. Because that is a way we've seen several attackers lose in more recent times. More frontline reinforcements, 66 Angmar halberds, 121 Guardians of Kharndoom to help shore things up on the front line. Numenorian Shield Guard are going to pile into the front line. Their armour piercing will be useful against most of these units if they can deploy it against the pikes. We shall have to wait and see. Franadine Berserkers doing really, really well, of course. Their armour piercing in melee, so they should be against the armoured forces of Numenor. Shield Guard should be able to poke through some good damage there as well, though. Frotrum Javelins and all of these skirmishers still biding their time. This poor unit of Snaga has been hit from a couple of angles at this point, but they've used up all their ammunition, and that's all you can ask of a unit such as that. Harad moving forward again. There you can see the Trollshore Axe Throwers going after, I think, the Hashari, which, fair enough, I suppose. Southron Archers potentially moving forward. I mean, if Harad were willing to be really aggressive here, they could shoot into the back of this Angmar front line with something, and that would be really, really devastating. But they're electing not to do that, which is quite surprising to me. Longbottom mob. Neither side looking too great after this, but again, the Rangers trying to get back into position. But now the cat's out of the bag. As soon as Morris comes anywhere near this area, you can see the flurry of pebbles that are going in there. A few of them will hit the Angmar halberds as well. a strange kind of fight this, but this will be coming to a head fairly soon. I would imagine we're going to see quite a lot of hectic activity. The witches should still be at the back somewhere, I think. Frogem javelins have been moved into position as well. Doing damage to the Naran Irish Sentinels, good choice of target. Joran's army is actually struggling. Joran's got an excuse though, they've definitely bulked up most of all on his front line. The time has come for Tundra to move forward, and that doesn't indeed seem to be what is happening now. The Mumakil. Will he follow through with an infantry assault though? He's pushed through the lines, he's going to cause all manner of havoc with these Mumakil. But it's only really going to be useful if he consolidates his gains. You can see, yeah, one of the Mumakil dies already, another one dies. Actually, no, it's just the one. I thought two of them died, but no. And he's retreating them. So again, I'm not really sure what the point of that was. Tundra's a very good player, so I'm a little bit confused as to why he's approaching this battle in the way that he is. Rhudaur swordsman winning out on this front line now, not enough Proudfoot protectors. The Hobbits not known for their heft in melee, of course. But still, the Longbottom mob with their extremely high ammunition count. They might be the unit in the game that's got the highest ammunition overall, to be honest with you. More arrows coming from the Harad side of the battlefield, but the Etamor's Troll Hunters pretty good at absorbing that kind of punishment, and they've got a good shot into the troll map. Some hobbits have snuck their way behind enemy lines. Longbottom mob, but they immediately rout because they've got no support and they're not really designed for this kind of thing. Solo missions behind enemy lines are above their pay grade. Where are the witches? Well, wherever they are, they haven't been utilised yet. Pharism Swordmasters being committed to the front line, so it's a sign of... excuse me. A sign potentially of desperation. I mean, Joran doesn't really have much left other than this, so he's committed everything forward at this point. And he is fighting this front line to a standstill. But... trackers are in melee. There are the witches. Be interesting to see what happens there. The hobbits taking advantage of the big gap that was on this choke point now. So hobbitry in arms flooding through the defensive positions. Can the defenders hold their shape, or is it too late? Still, Harad don't move in, but more javelins doing yet more damage to the defending infantry. Angmar halberds. Mumakil potentially coming back. They have managed to close off these front lines again, for the most part anyway. Rhudaur swordsmen doing their thing. Longbottom mob going to be throwing their pebbles still. Shows how much ammunition they truly have. And then the whistle of crossbows as well. Serpent's Fangs heading over here. Those crossbows can get their teeth into a really good unit. Then it's going to be pretty nasty for the defenders. And the hobbits are making good headway here. The Franavine pikemen will block their advance, but it's going pretty well, you'd have to say. Trolls of Angmar. Where are the witches? They're still hanging out at the back. They've still got reinforcements to defenders. They can certainly outlast Numenor, whose assault hasn't gone that well, but that's not really Numenor's fault. They stumbled into the role of being the fall guy, and I have to say it was Harad. They were lagging behind. They're moving forward now, but will it be enough? It should be. I think they've done a decent job, the attackers, of setting the stage. They may not have executed perfectly, but I think it's going to be difficult for the defenders, unless of course they use something like the witches, which they could do now on the Haradrim, which would be a bit of a game changer. Just sort of stood there. I mean, they better hope they don't get seen by something like the Demons of the Desert if they're in range, because they'll shred through the witches, and there we go. It is going to be... I mean, they did damage to the Demons of the Desert, but it wasn't like a devastating blow right to the middle of their infantry corps. Again, most of those shots going wide. We could be seeing the witches' ammunition not exactly utilised to its full potential once again. And now the archers are going to try and skirmish them down, so you either use up all your ammo now, dump it quickly, or leave the area. You can see the Pharism nobles are trying to charge into this little section of infantry which is working up the line, made up of what's left of the Berserkers and Snaga, who the Snaga break actually. So they have managed to bring this back under control. The Reforged Javelins were there, but Morris moved them off the front line. Pharism Swordmasters doing really, really well on this front line, considering they're going right into the teeth of Pikeman. And Morse Troll Hunters are here. Serpent's Fangs are shooting in now as well, which is a real problem because those poison projectiles are going to be useful against evil man and orc factions for helping to rout them. The Rhudaur general falls, the enslavers in melee against the Haradrim. The hobbits will run out of steam, I think, at some stage, but that's not really the point. I think at this point the fact that the Haradrim should have enough to get them over the line. I mean, I'm not sure, it is still a relatively even fight. Certainly, I think if those witches had hit centre mass of an army and did horrid damage, could be looking at something quite different. Trollmen are on the way over here again. The Mumakil is still here. I'm not sure how you would use the Mumakil in a battle such as this now. Nara and Iris Sentinels, only 32 of them. You can see how good the Witch Realm Pikemen have been in this fight. Probably the most significant unit, to be honest, because they have held Numenor in place for those skirmishers and they're not that damaged. Considering the quality of Numenor's infantry in relation to yours as Angmar, Angmar's infantry is fine, but it's not on the level of Numenor's. If you can hold them at arm's length with your pikes like that, surround them with enough numbers to make sure your formation doesn't get buckled, you're in a good position. Numenor, as a result, has really struggled to respond to that. The hobbits have made progress. Poison arrows, there's still 2 rangers. The hobbits, of course, were on the receiving end of the Franadine Rangers earlier on, and they themselves are not really designed for this sort of heavy-duty combat, and the trolls have been saved till now, and they will now feast upon some long-bottom mob. Still some Serpent's Fangs over here. I think these Goblin Tracks are trying to get in melee with them to stop them from doing their thing, but even if they do, they would rout immediately because they're already wavering. The Blackwatch Legion would probably be a better choice, and then follow through with the Witch Realm Hammer Guard. Once again, the Witches are over here. Ooh, and they did get a volley there into the middle of the Haradrim ranks. It was mostly on Southron archers though, so not the best. And it is looking at this point like the infantry focus here of the defenders is going to pay off in the end. I feel as though a part of that is the slightly disjointed nature of the attackers as they moved in. And the damage, it kind of worked out as I thought. The long-range skirmish early on going in favour of the attackers, but the damage that you can lay out with Rhudaur and Angmar quickly with your shorter range skirmishes is very substantial. Pharism Nobles getting up to the top of this hill, the ruins, but there's not really going to be all that much waiting for them, and the Numenor infantry at this point is pretty much all gone. Ah yes, the Eagles. The Eagles are here, but they're not going to be useful really at all, because they can charge into the front of this line, but the pikes are going to engage with them, and of course they count as cavalry. So these pikes are going to slay at least one of them, surely. They'd be very lucky if they got away there with all of it, but now the unit is also stretched, so it's going to be more difficult for Froggy to use his unit when one of them is sat there. What happened to the other unit of Eagles? Because there were 2 of them, were there not? There are the Trolls, there are the Pharism Nobles, causing a nuisance. I mean, they're causing chaos, the Pharism Nobles. And the Demons of the Desert are moving over here, maybe trying to get into a position to shoot this blob. Serpent's Fangs are a very capable infantry unit as well. They're much better than the Blackwatch Legion. Not so much when it comes to the Hammer Guard, but well, there are the Eagles. Again, need to be careful about getting into sustained melee with the Etymals Troll Hunters. They need to get away, like into one of these hills, and get a good position, or get a good run up so they can charge into something. If they do that, like this, they managed to charge into, that was Franadine Pikemen actually, but you can see they flattened most of that unit that was remaining. Now they need to get out of melee with them, because otherwise it's going to be bad news for them. Reforged Javelins are here. I just don't think they've got the infantry left at this point, the attackers. And late game, when you have a bunch of pikes, that's always a pretty good sign, although those Pharism Nobles there charging into the back of those pikes very nicely and doing a ton of damage. So that's pretty good. I mean, we're getting down to the business end of this fight. What do the Haradrim have left? Do they have their Mumakil? They do. Mumakil and Grey Eagles. And Trolls. Interesting monstrous creatures. And there the Mumakil getting a melee attack. It's often very difficult to get the Mumakil to do that before they perish, but when they do, it does horrid damage to the units that they are engaged with. Yeah, but you can see here the Trolls capable of doing a lot of damage as well. The Trolls plenty bloodied up from their exertions here. What will the Great Eagles do now? They do get a charge into the Reforged Javelins, I think. But again, they'll need to cycle out of there quickly, otherwise those clubs will start to lay down some impressive damage. What little remains of Numenor is here, and unsurprisingly it is the Naru Sentinels and the Pharism Swordmasters together. And here come the Great Eagles. Could they help what's left of Numenor? I mean, they do get a very nice charge there, doing huge damage there to the Witchram Pikemen and actually breaking them. Surprised, Froggy's used his Great Eagles far better than I thought he would. Those Pharism Nobles now need to be utilised, they need to continue to do that. Oh, there goes the Haradrim General. The Mumakil have lasted longer than I thought they would as well, so credit to the attackers for that. They've definitely given it their all with actually their more difficult to use units. Here you can see the Serpent's Fangs, 22 of them remain. 4 Trolls and a few Hammer Guardsmen are here though, so I'm not sure if they can win. They're actually the kind of unit that should be pretty good against the Trolls, but they're quite isolated and damaged at this point. It's very close though. 2% in it. And one of these units is a cavalry unit. If they don't have the sufficient tools for dealing with, especially stuff like this, like do the defenders at this point have what it takes to deal with the Sentinels and the Pharism Swordmasters? They'll need to overwhelm them with pressure and melee. Shire still have a bit of ammunition left. They'll be doing damage, I would assume, to the Witchram Blackguard. Or just doing damage to anything at this point would be worth it. Yeah, the Serpent's Fangs have been defeated, but they've done damage. Or will they be defeated? The Hammer Guard, I think, are all gone. And there's only 1 Troll left, so yeah, I guess the Serpent's Fangs will actually be victorious. Every little helps, and the attackers look like they're turning this around, and if they do manage to turn it around, it'll be because of the cavalry, the Mumakil and the Great Eagles, which would have been the last units I would have expected to unlock a defence around a sort of tightly packed formation like this. But I guess the defenders smelled blood in the water, they came forwards, they tried to flush the attackers away, and in the end they maybe bit off a little bit more than they could chew. Attenmore's Troll Hunters going to be engaged by pikes, and they rout as a result, so the defending morale here is on the verge of collapse. Very topsy-turvy battle this, a weird one, but a good one. So Angmar are gone, which means Rhudaur are all that remains, but what do they have left? Would be my question. There's Demons of the Desert there, Serpent's Fangs. Is that what they have left? No, everything's routing, is it not? There must be something. There must be like a unit of 1 still in here somewhere. Yeah, he was over there. The Shire and the Demons of the Desert bring him down. Close. I mean, it was 97 to 97, but of course there were still routing units from the defenders. Really interesting that. I'm glad that we saw a battle actually where the monstrous units were used to good effects. It shows they can be effective. I still think the Mumakil in particular, with the way that they work, need to be changed up a little bit. The cavalry was used well. The Great Eagles were used well. Now, I know the Great Eagles can be very effective because they're effectively just uber shock cavalry that have no melee attack, which it's obvious to see how useful they can be if used in the right circumstances, but I didn't think the right circumstances would crop up on this occasion. But the Great Eagles were used very, very nicely. They wiggled their way through the pike line, and that's why you should always be very careful about leaving gaps, because if those pikes had managed to close off that line to those Great Eagles, I don't think this battle would have gone in favour of the attacks. I think the defenders would have held on, because those pikes would have massacred the Great Eagles on the way through. But such is the way of things. Let's see what did the damage for DF Morris. A lot of his projectiles, I'd imagine, yeah, Reforged Javelins, Rhudaur Berserkers at melee and in melee and at range. Admiral's Giants did okay. One of them actually under 100 kills, probably not good enough in a situation like this. Rhudaur Rangers again did okay, but possibly not enough considering what Rangers should be doing. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that they were uncovered, sort of Minesweeper style, by Froggy's skirmishers. And then Froggy knew where they were, so when they revealed themselves, you always had at least one unit of long bottom mob ready to do damage to them in return. So the Rangers were kept in their box for the most part, which is a very important thing to do if you're the attackers in the current meta of the game, albeit that could change relatively soon. Rhudaur Pikemen did well on the front line, as you would often expect from a unit like them. Rhudaur Clansmen did okay, one unit of them. The Blackwolds against the Hobbits, armor-piercing, focused though they may be, they still have enough damage to really cause a lot of problems for the Hobbits. And then you have the Rhudaur Nobles getting 100 kills, which I think too many of them were wasted early as well. Like, they could have been used more effectively, I think, later on. But yeah, big thank you to Morris for sending this battle to me, and a big thank you to all the players for being a part of this one. Nice to see the Eagles and the Mumakil and some cavalry used effectively in an offensive motion in a siege battle like this, or a pseudo-siege battle anyway. On a map. Well, last time we saw this map, actually, this little defensive position with the ruins wasn't actually used, so I'm glad that I could show this off this time. Now, something that I should mention, by the time this video comes out, things may have already progressed quite a lot in that regard. I'm not talking about sort of my personal situation, but the mod itself. Work has started in earnest, and testing has started in earnest, from my perspective anyway, here in early February, on the next patch of Reforged. So it's been a long time coming, but work has gotten underway on that. So you may see a couple of things from the testing build crop up occasionally on my channel. But we'll see on that one. I'm not sure how that's going to be structured as such, but it's good to see that things are moving on. So potentially 3 factions still to be added to Reforged, of course, with the Rovanian, which are an interesting concept for a faction. I'm interested to see where they take that, because I wasn't sure there was enough to do the Rovanian. I thought between Dale and Dorwinian you'd already plumbed the depths, but potentially not. And then there's, of course, the ever-elusive Eredluin and Doguldur. But again, we can talk about that more in relevant videos, but that is something that I should mention is potentially on the way as well. But yeah, other than that, same sort of thing applies. I imagine that the channel update has already happened at this point. By this stage as well, where we're getting into mid to late March, I would imagine that my relocation has definitely already happened. So if you're messaging me after this battle, the situation will have changed a little bit. Quite how significant that change is going to be, we'll have to wait and see, because I have an idea of what I'm going to be doing with the channel, at least in terms of how I'm going to be recording and how I'm going to be setting things out. But things can always change. Like I said, watch this space, essentially. It's going to be an interesting time to figure out how things are going to work moving forwards. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.